Welcome back to News in Focus. Joining me now to take this conversation forward with regards to women in politics, I'd like to welcome Member of Parliament from Build One South Africa. She's also its Deputy Leader, Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster. Nobuntu, always good to have you on here. Thank you so much for joining us.
So pleased to be here and to be able to join you, especially on Women's Month.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think the first question to start off with, Nobuntu, it's the year 2025. I remember we had this conversation last year, but let's look at this year. And in your view, where are women now in terms of the political spectrum within South Africa?
So I think this is an important conversation to have. And, I want to actually encourage us to have this conversation more than once a year, to have it more than in August when it's Women's Month or in March when it's International Women's Month, because it speaks to the very fiber of our society. I often tell the story of how I once went to a meeting, a community meeting, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, and found that there were various community issues that were being discussed. And it was very clear that the women knew what was happening in their community. The women were the ones who understood the challenges and actually that understood what the solutions were and that were actually out there every day implementing those solutions, whether it was about load shedding, or actually no electricity at all in some parts of the community, whether it was about some of the crime that was taking place in the community, whether it was about hunger amongst some of the children in that community. It was the women that were doing the work. I then got to see the committee that represented that community. And there was only one woman in a committee of about 10 people. And the woman, of course, was the secretary who made sure that she recorded and distributed minutes, etc., of that meeting. And so when I talk about the fiber of our society and the importance of this conversation for the fiber of our society is because while we have one of the higher representations in Parliament of women, as long as that has not translated to what the economy looks like, as long as we don't see participation, equal participation and equal ownership in the economy, I mean, the face of poverty in this country is a woman. So as long as we have not seen that, as long as we have not seen that translates to executive and board positions where currently we have less than 25% of executive CEOs on JSE-listed companies being women. As long as that has not translated to us having a woman president in this country, you're talking about politics. So long as that's not translating, then we have not done enough and there is still more work to be done.
And Ubuntu, I mean, you're mentioning it now, I mean, the higher representation of females in parliament, 46%, and then, of course, 36% in the National Council of Provinces. I mean, this is great in terms of numbers, but is this enough in terms of the overall representation of women? Because if we're having this number in the National Assembly and it's not translating into the other spheres of society, then we really are banging our heads to nothing.
I think we need to start talking more about the role of women in their political parties, about the role of women in governance and their seniority, not only in their political parties, but also in government. I think we can then start having a more progressive kind and direction-driven kind of conversation. Because while you can have good numbers in parliament, I mean, you look at Rwanda, for example, where it's close to 60% representation of women, but those same women don't necessarily have the power that you would need them to have for influence and for change. And so it is not enough to just have the numbers. We need to start looking beyond numbers. We need to start going, what are the roles that these women occupy? How many of them are chairs? How many of them are ministers? In those ministerial roles, to what extent do they have power and influence and agency? We need to start looking at when we talk about the representation that sits in political parties. To what extent are women who are MPs in political parties sitting in those top structures of political parties? How many of those women in parliament are presidents of political parties? I can tell you now it's one.
Yeah.
it's Trisha DeLillo of the Good
Yes,
Party.
yes.
How many of those women are deputy presidents of their party? I may just be the only one in that parliament. How many of them are secretary generals? I don't know that any of the women in parliament are SGs in their parties. And so those are the things we need to start looking for. And those are the things that we need to start measuring when we measure, do we have representation?
It comes to the next question, Nobuntu, with regards to women representation in high-level political positions globally. I think we look here in Africa, of course. Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma served at one stage for the African Union, and of course you've got Ursula von der Leyen in the European Union. But it's one of very few that we are seeing. And I just wanted to get your take on how do we change the trend so that women are represented higher in much more important positions from a global perspective.
Absolutely. I think we've seen it in Malawi. We had Joyce Banda. We've seen it in Liberia. We've seen it more recently in Namibia. And I think we have to learn from those experiences that we've seen in these various countries. I think that is important. I think we need to start getting to a point where it's not just an exception or a miracle. As we need to not see it as an exception or a miracle that women are occupying these positions. We need to see it as gender parity that has been pursued more deliberately within that ruling party, for example, in Namibia and within cabinet. It's not perfect structures, and we might disagree politically, but I think we need to learn from that. We need to learn from the competence, particularly of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf as an example. She emerged, and she wasn't just a symbol, but she was a capable leader.
Sure.
And we need to also, even as women, support each other and hold each other accountable for excellence and showing our capability as well.
Nobuntu, before we go to the break, women entering politics in itself, it's a hostile environment, it's challenging, it takes a lot out of a person. I mean, I always tell the story when I studied politics at the University of Johannesburg, very few women were there, and I felt, why? And I always felt that it was always seen as a more, a field where the males dominated. Surely we now in the year 2025, we need to be looking better at that. We need to be looking much more broader at that. And I ask you, what do you feel are some of the challenges that present women if they want to enter this field?
So I think there's a number of challenges. The first that we have to look at is how women are viewed in society. And the way we change how women are viewed in society and the way we make sure that women start to be viewed more as leaders in society is by being leaders as women. That is the first. I think it starts with us. And it starts with being the change that we want to see. So the more women that we see taking up leadership is the more that it starts to become something that is not an exception in society, something that is accepted and actually respected in society. I see sometimes some of the comments on Twitter about women in politics and women leading and the idea of a woman president, and it shows the extent to which society is not yet transformed. So that becomes important. But the second is the media. The media has to showcase these women who are leading. The media has to showcase these women who are in politics. The media has to give just as much platform to women in politics as it does to men in politics. And then lastly, it becomes about the environment. And you talk about toxic environments, you talk about violent environments. I, for one, am a co-founder in a political party, and that being the case, I take it as my responsibility to build the kind of political party that is not repelling to women, the kind of political party that doesn't have the kind of characteristics that are hostile towards women. And we have to take that responsibility. Every woman who finds themselves in leadership in a political party, that is our responsibility to make sure that we are attracting other women, we are attracting other women who are talented and who are leaders. And that is something that you ensure by being not only just that leader, but by being a leader that uses their influence to create an environment where women can actually thrive and lead.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster with regards to the discussion on women in politics. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to News in Focus. I'm still in conversation with Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster. She is a Member of Parliament and Deputy Leader of Build One South Africa. Nobuntu, again, thank you so much for staying with us. Let's talk of, would it be ignorant of us to not speak about this, and that's none other than gender-based violence. And I know we had this conversation last year, and we're still grappling with it. I mean, bills can be signed. So much can be said from a talking perspective, from the lip service that is coming. But if nothing is being done, then we are really heading into somewhere where it's going to bring to us no results. Nobuntu, you sit in Parliament. I mean, what do you feel needs to be done from a legislative perspective in order to make sure that we're not just combating this pandemic, but we're eliminating it once and for all?
Sure, there's a number of interventions that are needed for us to be able to really, really conquer the pandemic of gender-based violence. First of all, we need the political will that addresses this issue as the crisis that it is. And my sense is often that we don't have the political will, we don't have the sense of urgency that we need to have when it comes to gender-based violence. I mean, when you speak about what are the legislative interventions, one that we have championed as Build One South Africa is making the National Register for Sex Offenders public. We continue to champion that. We've just recently called for the cabinet members, for all cabinet members to be vetted against the National Register for Sex Offenders. And that is important because some of what needs to happen, whether it's at legislative level, whether it's at law enforcement level, and I mean, the General Mkhwanazi files, as I call them, are evidence of this, of how involved top political leaders are in some of the crimes that take place in this country and some of the corruption that takes place in this country. And so we need to make sure that from a policy, from a legislative, from a law enforcement, from a justice perspective, we have the political will. Because a lot of the time, and the National Register for Sex Offenders is an example, there is no reason whatsoever why we have not had the kind of progress we need with the National Register for Sex Offenders, except that there's no political will. And there's no political will because some of the people that hold power are men that are afraid their names will come up should that register be made public. It's as simple as that. And so we have got to use the space that we have in Parliament. We've got to use the votes we have in Parliament. We've got to use the voice that we have in Parliament to be able to push for that particular piece of legislation. But there's more. When it comes to law enforcement, we've got to be able to use our power, our influence collectively, especially as women, politicians, to be able to make sure that there is law enforcement and that actually the environment is enabling for law enforcement to take its course. That you have the specialized kind of mechanisms, the specialized tools within police stations, the specialized staff and resourcing to deal with issues of gender-based violence. Because even reporting is a problem in this country because of what you find when you get to a police station. We've got to make sure that the justice system enables the kind of justice that we need to see, the kind of prosecutions that we need to see. Prosecution levels are so low for gender-based violence. Some of what we need are specialized courts. Some of what we need are the special technical support that makes it possible, forensics, that makes it possible to be able to convict and to be able to make sure that those cases don't have the low prosecution level that we have now. Those are the things that we need to do. That's the work that we need to do.
Nobuntu, I mean, you speak about prosecutions. Let's bring up recent cases. And I know Build One South Africa had been very vocal about it. Of course, the Omotoso trial that had happened. Many of the victims coming out and crying and saying that, where is the justice? We then look at, of course, the bail that was given to Oscar Pistorius. You hear the Steenkamp family crying out the injustices there. We, of course, had the rape or the allegations of rape on Kwekwe, the 7-year-old girl. And again, there seems to be nothing that is happening there. Frustrations. You mentioned Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi. He's, of course, laid bare how bad the country's police and the security systems are. And that really does not make it comfortable for women and girls in our society to really have the freedoms that they want.
So first of all, we have to empower the National Prosecuting Authority in this country better. We have to have the right person at the helm of that. I don't believe we currently do. And that's something we've been calling for as Build One South Africa. We have to have the kind of resources that the National Prosecuting Authority needs in order to ensure that we do indeed see justice in this country. We simply are not resourcing the NPA enough. And so that is one aspect of it and what we keep seeing. But the rest of it does really speak to, like I say, law enforcement. The rest of it does speak to political will. The rest of it does speak to the likes of legislation like that which we are pushing for an amendment of the Sexual Offences Act for the National Register to be made public. I can't say this enough. When we often speak of victims, we know them. You know, you have these big cases that happen where you end up knowing the names of the victims really, really well. And yet you don't know the name of the perpetrator, and it's somebody that you could meet. It's somebody that could come into your house, into your workplace, because, I mean, right now, there are perpetrators that have been very, very public, or cases that have been very public, where the perpetrators are going to be out in the next 8 to 10 years or less. And Uyinene is one of them.
Yes, yeah.
You know, and that is the reality that we were faced with, where we say we keep having these cases that from time to time will shake us and will rock us as a nation. And I'm glad they still do. I'm glad we have not gotten used to the idea of femicide and gender-based violence. But the reality is that they happen. And then once they happened, we move on with our lives. We remember the name of this girl. We remember the face of this woman. But we never know who's the one that was the perpetrator. Those are the kinds of interventions. That's the kind of legislation we need to continue to push. And we've made it a commitment as Build One South Africa that we will make sure that the Sexual Offences Act is amended to be able to make the register public. And so that is just one. There are many others. We also continue to write to the Minister of Police. We continue to hold the Minister of Police accountable. We continue to offer solutions for law enforcement to take its course. We continue to offer solutions for justice, and we will do that. But it also becomes up to South Africans to actually vote for the kind of people who will have the integrity, to have the political will to actually properly bring change. And so we have this crisis that we're talking about today of gender-based violence, which is still a crisis and which we feel not enough is being done about it, but you keep voting the same people into power who are not doing enough about it.
Nobuntu, one final question to wrap up this conversation. I mean, how close or how far are we in terms of finally having a female president in our country?
This question always comes up on Women's Day.
And I know it comes up, but I think it's worth speaking about it, because I'm sure we'd love to see this in our lifetime, sooner rather than later.
We really, really do. And not just for representation. Representation matters, and we have to see it because of representation. But because I believe for as long as you are, as a nation, not leveraging on all the talent that you have, on all the brilliance that you have, every gender, every race, every background, then you're not going to get to where you need to as a country. And so for as long as 31 years into democracy, we still have not had a woman president, it means that we have not leveraged on all the talent that we have in this country, or all the brilliance that we have in this country. I want to believe that we're getting close, because we do have women leaders, we do have women political leaders in this country. I want to believe that we're close because there are so many people that we've seen do brilliant work. I mean, for instance, there are many, many people who celebrate Naledi Pandor, and she's unfortunately retired now, but there are many more other Naledi Pandors. And so there's a lot where that came from. South Africa has produced many brilliant leaders who hold political office. And so the more we showcase those leaders, I want to believe we're getting close to having a woman president. I certainly want to see it in my lifetime.
I couldn't agree with you more there, Nobuntu. I would love to see that also happen, definitely. Nobuntu, unfortunately, I have to stop you there because we are out of time. Always a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster, Member of Parliament from Build One, South Africa. Well, that's all we have for you here from News in Focus from myself, Hospital, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.